Good morning, South Africa. Good afternoon, Singapore. Embassy Direct welcomes everyone connected here today or viewing later online this webinar to celebrate Heritage Month, this year dedicated to honor the works of the talented South African artist Solomon Linda and indigenous music. We wish to thank Her Excellency Charlotte Lobe and His Excellency Zainal Mantaha, our moderator Master Chung, and our distinguished panelists from Singapore and South Africa, who will later be sharing their experiences and knowledge about today's topic. I am proudly the grandchild of Jose Maria Chiari, the descendant of Italian and Spanish settlers, of Mok Man Hing, a Chinese immigrant trader, of Felix Alvarez, a Caribbean mulatto cobbler, and of Geronimo, a Filipino soldier who fought under General MacArthur in the Pacific during World War II and changed his name to honor the American native warriors that defended their territory in the 19th century. Heritage is our social cultural DNA that grants us our national identity. Let's embrace it with an Ubuntu approach. I am because we are, not only on this day, but every second of our lives and beyond. And now, without no further delay, allow me to introduce His Excellency Zainal Mantaha, Singaporean High Commissioner to the Republic of South Africa. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Rodrigo Chiari, or Chiari, as you would pronounce it, Rodrigo. Thank you for that rousing introduction, and I'm very pleased to be able to join all our participants that are checking in online, as well as the panelists who will be speaking at the roundtable later. And in fact, I'm based in Pretoria, as you all know. I've been in South Africa for the last 12 months or so, almost a year already. It has been a very wonderful experience. And this is, in fact, my second Heritage Day. So let me start by wishing everyone in South Africa a happy Heritage Day, belatedly, of course, but it is a happy Heritage Month. I hope that it has not only been an occasion of thoughtful reflection on the history of South Africa, but also a joyful celebration of the colorful heritage of your rainbow nation. Whilst you enjoy, of course, your delicious braai. For those of you in Singapore, braai is, of course, the South African barbecue. And you may not know this, but the other name for Heritage Day in South Africa is also the National Braai Day, because braai is pretty much a part of South African heritage, of course. Now, I'm very pleased to be joined here by my sister and my partner in crime, Her Excellency Charlotte Lobe, the High Commissioner of South Africa in Singapore, who has only also quite recently joined her team in Singapore. And my God, during that short period of time, Charlotte, you have done tremendous work in terms of lifting the relationship between our two countries. Of course, we are both helped by the fact that the pandemic is behind us for the moment. We are still very careful and cautious, of course, because it's not quite over. But at least the lifting of the restrictions, both in South Africa as well in Singapore, have opened up opportunities for us to try to catch up what we lost over the last 2 years. And this webinar is certainly an example in which we can bring people together to engage in a dialogue on issues and challenges and solutions that we have in common. And so I'm very, very pleased to be joining all of you here. But I also would like to congratulate Rodrigo, of course, Ambassador Chiari, and his team at Embassy Direct for this initiative. This platform is a very important platform, and particularly because it is timely, considering the fact that heritage is both important to South Africa and Singapore. But, you know, this is not something which we can disagree with. Heritage is a very central to the notion of identity, both in our part of the world as well as in Africa. The sense of shared history creates a sense of our connection to the countries we all call home, and the people we call our family, our fellow countrymen and countrywomen. But as globalization and technology, and especially infocom technology, increase exponentially our interactions with the outside, the bonds that keep a country together have come under stress, or can come under stress. They threaten to open new cleavages and widen old gaps in society. Embracing our heritage helps strengthen our cohesion and our identity as a people. Reinforcing appreciation of shared history and values reinforces our sense of confidence as a nation and strengthens the sense of purpose as the country navigates new challenges and seizes future opportunities. Now, from the very beginning, my colleagues in Singapore would know this well. The Singapore story has been one of hope and diversity, as our forefathers left their homelands in search of a better future. They settled in Singapore from the other parts of the Malay archipelago, from the Indian subcontinent, from the Chinese mainland, and even from the motherlands of the colonial powers who were then in charge in our part of the world. The diasporas added much color and vibrancy, and out of this rich diversity and plurality, we have built and are still building a Singapore identity. Together, we take pride in our uniquely Singaporean norms and habits, the way we speak, our food, our social habits, etc. Now, despite our relative youth as a nation, we have done not too badly, in my view, to uphold our heritage and to keep it a living tradition. More and more Singaporeans are stepping forward to celebrate our rich heritage, especially the young, and during the annual Singapore Heritage Festival, which just took place, I believe, in June, last June. It was launched about 20 years ago, but the festival has become an important platform for individuals, community partners, and heritage groups to co-create and co-organize programs to raise awareness of and celebrate our history and living cultural heritage. Now, in 2018, for the first time since our independence, Singapore conceived of the Singapore Heritage Plan, which is a strategic plan aimed at safeguarding and promoting our heritage for future generations. It deals with questions like, what is our heritage? What do we know about our heritage? And how do we pass down our knowledge to future generations? But we saw heritage as more than just our history. It is a part of us within our families and in our communities. It is in our experiences, in our daily lives, and also on special occasions, the festivals that we celebrate. Our heritage is also diverse and complex, not unlike that in South Africa. It reflects our multiculturalism, and it is enriched by the interactions between different ethnicities and religions in Singapore. To that end, we have strengthened and multiplied our heritage institutions, the museums, the various cultural centers. We have conducted outreach programs and activities to raise the awareness of our heritage and the importance of preserving its myriad facets. Crisscrossing Singapore are now heritage trails that bring the Singapore story closer to the neighborhoods, the heartlands of Singapore. We have also compiled the Singapore Intangible Cultural Heritage Inventory, which is based on UNESCO's definition of intangible cultural heritage. The inventory includes performing arts, such as the Malay and the Indian classical dance. Social practices such as traditional weddings and traditional craftsmanship of potteries and jewelry have also been included in that inventory. In 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, the inscription of the Singapore hawker culture on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity filled the whole country with a sense of national pride. And speaking of the pandemic, when COVID-19 struck, the heritage institutions in Singapore got highly creative and explored new ways to present our treasures. These innovations included digital offerings and 3D virtual galleries and augmented reality recreations of selected artifacts. They in fact enabled us to see artifacts in a completely new light and in the comfort of our own homes. And for the next 5 years, and building on the outcomes of the first master plan, the next edition of the Singapore Heritage Plan will focus on 4 pillars. The first is to strengthen a strong and confident Singaporean identity through our shared heritage. The second, encourage more ground-up initiatives and community ownership of such initiatives to ensure that the Singapore public has a stake in and feel invested in the shared heritage. Third, to develop the capacity of the heritage sector to create economic opportunities and strengthen its connection with industry. And finally, fourthly, to facilitate innovation through building capabilities to future-proof the heritage sector. Now, in conclusion, Ambassador Chiari, Excellency Charlotte Lobby, as well as panelists, I'm very confident personally, and in my capacity, of course, as the representative of Singapore in South Africa, that heritage will become even more important to Singapore as we stride into the future. It is beyond doubt that Singaporeans attach importance not only to progress in material terms, but also cleave strongly to their cultural heritage. This heritage is a collection of individual memories, individual stories, woven together into a national story. It is also something that belongs to every one of us in Singapore, and which each of us can contribute to and help to preserve individually as well as collectively. And as we progress further as a people and as a nation, our heritage will also evolve as we and the generations that come after us write new chapters of the Singapore story. And in that regard, there is much that Singapore and South Africa have in common. So I'm looking forward to this roundtable discussion, and I hope that all of you will enjoy it and will draw something from it. I certainly am. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Excellency. Very wise words. Very appreciated. And now I would like to introduce Her Excellency Charlotte Low, High Commissioner of South Africa in the Republic of Singapore. Madam, the floor is yours. Your mic, Excellency.
I was thanking you, Excellency, for making it possible for us to meet and celebrate the South African Heritage Month, and to assure members of the panel that most of our people are, of course, joining through other social media platforms in order for us to avoid some challenges we experienced in the past, so that you're at least assured of that right at the beginning. The High Commission of South Africa is elated to be part of this collaboration with the High Commission of Singapore in Pretoria and the Embassy Direct magazine. Let me take this opportunity to thank Ambassador Rodrigo and his team from Embassy Direct for initiating and also hosting this virtual celebration. I believe that even though COVID was so bad to all of us, but at least there are things that are good that we have taken out of COVID, and this includes the ability for us to meet in platforms like this without traveling and meeting with every one of you from the comfort of our air-conditioned offices. So even though it was bad, at least it left something that has changed the world of work completely. Since 1996, the South African government and its people, in fact, our people united in their diversity, celebrates the Heritage Month every September, first to foster greater social cohesion, secondly, to foster nation building, and just to have a shared national identity as South Africans. Heritage Month provides an opportunity for our nation to reflect on its rich, diverse culture and heritage. The focus of the 2022 Heritage Month is South Africa's indigenous music, which has played an important role during our struggle for democracy and freedom. This year, South Africa commemorates this important month under the theme, and I quote, celebrating the legacy of Solomon Linda and South Africa's indigenous music, close quote. As you are now aware, Solomon Linda is a pioneer of one of South Africa's traditional music genre called isicathamiya. As a musician, a singer, a composer, he's revered for composing the song Imbube, which later became the popular music success, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. And I'm sure everyone on this platform would remember the song, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. This song has given joy to many people around the world and has been adapted over the years by many people around the world, particularly artists from the West, without any royalties given to Solomon Linda or his children. And I believe things like this are part of the reasons why you have people like me and Ambassador Mantaha, who are supposed to be the representative of their people in foreign countries to make sure that a matter of this nature is not repeated. It was only in 2004 that his daughters brought a successful lawsuit against the Walt Disney Company, and therefore they got some royalties for the song Imbube, the Lion Sleeps Tonight. Imbube has also given its name to Imbombe style of isicathamiya, and later popularized by the Ladysmith Black Mambazo, who composed a song with Paul Simon in his 1986 album called Graceland. I'm sure all of you remember Homeless, Homeless. So I'm sure that you can relate to that. This is the legacy of Solomon Linda that South Africa is celebrating in 2022 through our Heritage Month. Our South African story, and I like this because I've not spoken to Ambassador Mantaha, but somehow it is the same as the story of Singapore. Our story is a story of a resilient nation, of a people who are overcomers and conquerors. There is nowhere in the world where a people consciously took a decision to go through a peaceful transition from one system to the other, but South Africans did, united in their diversity. We overcame the ugliest system of apartheid, a system that was declared crime against humanity in the UN in 1973. We are a nation that knows that tomorrow will be better than today. So part of what defines us is hope. And without talking to my counterpart, that is something that I believe is common between South Africa and Singapore. Likewise, Singapore is a nation of a resilient, I mean, their story is a story of a resilient nation. They are overcomers, they are conquerors. If you look at their history, the fact that they were able to get their independence in 1959, and after that they were part of the union with Malaysia, and after that were kicked out. It shows a resilient nation, but it also shows a people who is committed to build their country into something as beautiful that Singapore has now become. Going back to South Africa, with a history of divisions, we're able to bring all pieces of our heritage together into a beautiful melting pot of our modern culture that is deeply rooted in our cultural heritage. The 2022 Heritage Month therefore provides an opportunity for South Africans to recommit to the dream of a rainbow nation and thus work together to eradicate the divisions and injustices of the past, to foster unity and to promote a conscious sense of being proudly South African, a proud part of a nation whose heritage and culture is interwoven into the colors of a rainbow nation. The celebration of Heritage Month has created a conducive environment for all South Africans to embrace and celebrate what was inherited or bequeathed to them by their forefathers. Ambassador Manta already has said something about Heritage Day, also being known as Bride Day, because part of what South Africa wanted to do is for every South African to be proud of being different, but also being the same by being members of the Rainbow Nation. Cultural heritage, as you would know, is tangible and intangible heritage that we have passed down through our different generations. It is for this reason that this week, the South African High Commission in Singapore is supporting the State Diamond Trader South Africa in showcasing one of the elements of our cultural heritage that we sometimes do not talk about, our geological resource heritage, like our diamonds, our gold, our platinum group stones, etc. South Africa is staging, and I'm very proud about it, a majestic diamond show at the South African Pavilion as we speak, that ends on Friday at the Jewelry and Gems World Expo Singapore. This is the first time that our diamond industry came to Singapore to showcase our diamonds. When I was there, when we officially opened the pavilion yesterday, I was pretty impressed of the kind of stones that are being showcased there at the Jewelry and Gems World Expo. But also I was extremely happy that by 12 o'clock, South African companies had sold a number of stones. This shows one, the kind of a nation we are, a nation of people who push until the end. But secondly, it shows our willingness to negotiate with others, to want to create beautiful things with other nations. And the presence of South African diamonds this week in Singapore has created a new vibe around what defines South Africa, around what defines our cultural heritage. We have today invited South Africans from the creative arts industry to share their thoughts on how we can use creative arts to continue to build the Rainbow Nation. We have specifically selected composers, writers, poets, publishers, and performers to be part of these important discussions where, among others, would want to see how we can collaborate with Singapore in our quest of building relations between our people and the people of Singapore. And we do this, as I always say, that outside of the formally established diplomatic protocols, there is a need for our people to relate, to be able to share their experiences, to understand each other's cultures, but also for our people to be great pillars in building our nations, because if South Africans are able to learn from Singaporeans and Singaporeans are able to learn from South Africans, I believe that with all of these experiences, we can be able to build our nations to be as greater than they are today. We continue to work with Singapore-based organizations such as the Character and Leadership Academy to pursue possibilities of cultural exchange programs, particularly targeting young people as the leaders of today and the future. We are hoping that such programs will create a platform for learning across cultures. But in addition to that, we also engage and collaborate with other organizations that are not necessarily South African based or Singapore based, like the magazine that is edited by Ambassador Rodrigo, the Embassy Direct magazine, because we believe in the value of people working together and building and creating streams in a desert. And we believe that through these collaborations, we can be able to create streams in a desert. Increasingly, we have noted that creative arts industry is contributing immensely to preserve our cultural heritage, as well as to also build and contribute to economic growth of our countries. Historically, this industry has played key roles in influencing social change and preserving culture through passing on knowledge and tradition. As I conclude, Chairperson, in my view, arts has saved indigenous knowledge. It is through us that we can relate to how our people lived before today. It is through art that we are able to trace the kind of even the tools that our people used before today, even weapons that our people used before today. Art has saved our languages because it is through art that today our children can go into different cinemas. They can even go into platforms and like your market theater, like your Peckoffs, where they can go and listen and see people who perform in indigenous languages. And this tells you of a role that art is playing in preserving our indigenous languages as well. Art preserves indigenous music, and I am particularly happy that this year recognition is given to indigenous music in South Africa. As we meet today, I understand that in the Free State, the Mangaung Cultural Festival is taking place, where a number of elements from your creative arts are being showcased, whether it's craft, whether it's music, whether it's people who are performing on stage and showcasing our rich cultural heritage. And I hope that beyond that, we can be able to show the people of Singapore what South Africa culture is all about. And as you are aware, art has also saved families and communities through economic and social development. I am aware that in most cases, the economic spin-offs of creative art is sometimes undermined, is seen as people who are just there to entertain others without attaching the economic value of creative arts. And I believe that through what myself and Ambassador Mantaha calls economic diplomacy, we can be able to promote this work through our high commissions and promote the work of the people of Singapore in South Africa and those of the people of South Africa in Singapore. Thank you very much. I hope that from today, Chairperson, we will utilize this people who are here, who represent our artists, who represent the different genres, to make sure that as we celebrate our 30th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between South Africa and Singapore, we can stage, as I always say, something majestic, something that will showcase the cultural fusion of the people of South Africa and the people of Singapore. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Very kind words, very to the dot. I would like to add that myself, I came to Singapore 30 years ago, 20 years ago to South Africa, and I must say that I enrich my life with a lot of culture, with the incredible food of Singapore, with the blend of their different people. And in South Africa, definitely every single moment there is a story. So thank you to both of you, Excellencies, for having endorsed this event today. And I would like to pass now the mic to Mr. Chung Kwang Tong, our moderator today. Master Chung.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Excellencies, and also Ambassador Rodrigo. So I'll be introducing the speakers for today. I'll go around the table, okay, to introduce all our panelists at once. And after that, we will start our conversation for this afternoon. Okay, first we have Charmaine Cohen Melby. Okay, she's a Saswana author, a storyteller, a librarian, a publisher, a poet, and a book distributor with a full 6 years in writing. She had published over 20 books under her publishing company, including storybooks and poetry books and also children books. So next from Singapore, we have a very young gentleman, Shoku Raj Kumar, who is the chairperson of the Inter-Religious Organization, which is one of the oldest inter-religious or interfaith organization in the world. So he's actually from the youth wing, the chairperson. He's also the vice chairperson leading the learning and development team in the Hindu Youth Network that falls under the auspices of the Hindu Endowments Board. So Raj is also currently a graduate policy education intern with the Global E-commerce Governance and Experience team in TikTok. He is also currently doing his master's in international relations in the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, or the RSIS, in Singapore, in the NTU. The third speaker will be Bella Medulpi from South Africa, a theatre maker. Belina is a Free State-born artist based in Bloemfontein. Her area of specialty is on creative and cultural arts sector. She has over 20 years of experience, and she's a very prominent artist, a scriptwriter, an actor, a storyteller, a director, and a stage manager. Actually, the list is very long. Okay, he asked adjudicator, a community arts and youth developer, an events coordinator, and a social entrepreneur. Bella founded the Sagarona Cultural Youth Festival. It is a Setswana-based festival that promotes the inclusion of Setswana content in theatre. The fourth speaker is my brother from Singapore, Muhammad Imran Muhammad Taib. He's the founder for the Center of Interfaith Understanding, or SIFU, and the director of Dialogue Center. Imran is an interfaith and multiculturalism expert and has delivered talks and conducted various related events in Singapore and also the region. A graduate in philosophy, he writes regularly on issues of religion, society, and multiculturalism. And he has published in local newspapers. He also facilitates workshops to encourage dialogue and understanding among the different communities. He's currently worked as a researcher on interreligious issues. The fifth on our banner is Singh Jaros Jatfar. He's an international performing poet, a singer, a content developer, a creative strategist born in the Free State in South Africa. She writes in her home language, Sesotho, and English. Her poems are translated into different languages, including Spanish, Danish, and Mandarin. And her book, Free State of Mind, was adapted to Braille by the South African Library for the Blind. She has published 40 publications ranging from literary journals, poetry, anthropologies, compilations, novels, audiobooks, and children's books. So he has a master's in creative writing from the Rhodes University, and he's an accredited facilitator, assessor, and moderator. She's the founder of Motso Creative and Innovative Institute, and Jaros is the deputy president of the National Writers Association of South Africa. The sixth person on this panel is Mr. Ison Teo. He's a senior researcher with Singapore History Consultants, a premier research consultancy in Singapore. He's also the chief curator of the very first Hell Museum, the world's only museum on death and the afterlife. It's actually based in Haw Par Villa, a historical cultural park in Singapore. He's also the author of Jalan Singapura, 700 Years of Movement in Singapore. It's a book about the intertwined histories of land transport, traffic, urban development in Singapore over 700 years. So as a Singaporean, Ison believes that it is his duty to help conserve Singapore's heritage for future generations. And of course, our eighth speaker for this webinar is Dr. Sina Gopi. He's an author, storyteller, and founding director of the Ginamasiko Arts and Heritage Trust. Her works have been translated into many languages, including all the official South African languages, Kiswahili, French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and even Braille. She has directed her theatre plays in the United States, in UK, and also in Greenland. Her most widely known and studied theatre text is Have You Seen Zandale? Her poetry has also been reinterpreted into dance and classical music. So Some universities in both South Africa and internationally have awarded her with honorary doctorates. So Dr. Melfi Awards includes the SAMA for her CD, which is called Stories of Africa, and the Obie Awards and Joseph Jefferson Awards in the United States of America. Yeah, so very happy to have 8 of our panelists with us today. So I will start this discussion for today, especially on Heritage Month. So maybe I will start the first question for our panel. Okay, please keep your answers short and go straight to the point. You may use some photos or even slides to share with our audience today. So first of all, I understand that in both South Africa and Singapore, where I come from, we can all practice our belief and express ourselves through traditional arts and cultural heritage. So can our panelists maybe share with us one interesting cultural heritage from your respective countries in relation to what you do? You may also wish to touch on some of the origins of these practices and how this cultural heritage is still practiced or celebrated today. Maybe we'll go one round, starting from Shamin. Is Shamin around? You know, maybe my brother from Singapore. Raj, would you like to start the ball rolling?
Yes, it'd be a pleasure. Thank you. I think at least for me, I speak from the Indian diaspora within Singapore. So some of the cultural practices and heritage that are still done today are the art of Bharatnatyam. So Bharatnatyam is a classical dance form. And on top of that, the dance is used to convey not only stories from the spiritual scriptures, but also as an embodiment of the lessons or universal values. So I think at least within the Indian diaspora, we have the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the world is my family. And I think it resonates very strongly with the concept of Ubuntu in Africa, where I am because you are. So in that sense, I feel that at least universally, these art forms and heritage serve to actually connect us on a universal, spiritual, human level, and are a platform in which such values are actually translated between generations, where our stories and identities are passed down to each other. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Maybe we would like to hear from Dr. Sheena Masiko.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm so honored to be a part of this very, very important discussion. This webinar means a lot to me, and I'd like to greet our excellencies, both from Singapore to South Africa, and our beautiful excellency in Singapore representing our country. And I'd like to honor every single one of the panelists, because it means a lot when we share ideas. I always believe that when you want to hug a baobab tree, you can't do it as an individual. We need many people to hold hands and surround that baobab tree that talks about interculturalism. Then it means that whatever wisdom a nation has, it must also borrow from other cultures and other ways of sharing heritage and history. I also like the fact that we are in a position to speak to each other, even in times like these, when we are not able to travel to each other's countries. These platforms are really, really something to be celebrated. I come from a background of celebrating the oral tradition. I'm very, very proud to have grown up with a lot of storytelling, with a lot of celebration of our mother tongues. I feel like if you forsake your mother tongue, it's like removing your second skin, because it's your second skin, your mother tongue. You go everywhere with it. You need to preserve it. And storytelling has afforded me then the possibility of not only telling the stories of my people, but also share poetry. And over the years, I grew to write music. Most of the shows I have done, once I went into really, really full-time storytelling, whether it's for television or radio, or whether I'm performing all over the world. The songs I have been singing, I have been able to compose them because the storytelling means that you are all on stage, whether as a performer, as a storyteller, using words, using your body, using songs, using poetry, using interaction with people. People always say that, oh, you work so hard on stage, and what? It's not me working hard. It's me doing what I call sharing. The circle must be completed. Everything I'm doing, I'm sending it out. It comes right back to me, going out and comes back to me. And so the circle gets bigger and bigger. So in this platform, I'm thanking each and every one of you because you're allowing us to surround each other with the magic of our stories and our intangible heritage. And our heritages. Let's celebrate relationships between South Africa and Singapore.
Okay, next, maybe we'll hear from Brother Imran from Singapore.
Yes, selamat pagi to my fellow South Africans and selamat petang to my fellow Singaporeans. I'm using the Malay language, which is the national language of Singapore. We have 4 official languages, but everyone speaks English in Singapore. There's a lot of connection actually between Singapore and South Africa. I've not visited your beautiful country, but I hear stories about it. And I know that there is a famous figure from this part of the world, Yusuf al-Makassari, who was sent over there, imprisoned by the Dutch there in the 1600s, I think. And there's a group of people known as the Cape Malays, and I'm Malay myself. So there's a lot of connection, and I would love to know a little bit more about the Cape Malays if I get to visit South Africa. Anyway, Master Chung asked for a particular cultural tradition that is from our country. One thing is that we can't really confine culture to a specific nation-state boundary, because Singapore exists in a wider region of the Nusantara or the Malay-Indonesian world. So there's a lot of shared heritage actually coming from this part of the world. One that I would like to highlight is actually the batik. I wanted to wear the batik motif for my shirt today, but I was attending to some other event and I had to wear formal, but I put it down as my background. If you can see the motif of the batik, which is basically a fabric with wax-resistant dye applied to form motifs. Normally, it's motifs of flowers or animals or even geometric designs, and it's really an ancient art form that comes from the Nusantara world. Currently at the Asian Civilization Museum, I think there's a Batik Kita exhibition going on. So if you're in Singapore, you can visit that up till, I think, 2nd October is the last date to watch. This batik motif on fabric, it's worn on special occasions, also has an everyday kind of wear. And you can find this in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Indonesia. But of course, Indonesia claim it has the origin from Java. And in 2009, it was declared as a UNESCO Intangible Heritage for Humanity coming from Indonesia. But of course, as I mentioned, this is a shared heritage coming from the Malay-Indonesian world. The motifs and the patterns between those that you find in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia might differ slightly. Normally, those batik that you find in Malaysia will be having big floral designs. In Indonesia, you can find a little bit more intricate designs, and normally also you can find animal motifs, possibly because Malaysia has a lot more influence of Islam and therefore they use more patterns and flowers. Indonesia don't have so much of that taboo, so you can find animal motifs printed and dyed on those batik. They can be hand-drawn or they can be block printed. And there's also a Hari Batik Nasional in Indonesia on 2nd October, if I'm not mistaken. And in Singapore, in Malaysia, we will wear it on special occasions, and it cuts across all races. Even I think Master Chung also sometimes wear batik to official events. It's worn by everyone, Chinese, Malays, Indians. I think that's part of our shared culture, shared heritage. And I don't think it can be confined simply to the Malay ethnic group. And it also cannot be confined to Singapore. So that is something that we ought to celebrate together, at least from this part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. So next we'll hear from our sister from South Africa, Jaros Chapta.
Well, greetings, everyone, in South Africa and in Singapore, Your Excellencies and the panelists. Quite a privilege also to be here. It is in our names. It's for us. It starts there. It starts in our clan names. It starts in our languages. We put so much description in our names. We put so much description in where we come from in our languages, to put emphasis in our worldview and our imagination of where we can go, how we characterize ourselves. It's exuded from naming a child when they are born, from their clan names that they come from, that trace their background, where they come from, their lineages, their bloodlines, their family trees. And oftentimes these characters will be aligned to our totems, from animals to trees to nature, because we are very close to nature. And I think nature is a huge part of our heritage, our seas, our land, our skies, our astrology. It is part of who we are as a nation. So when you name a child, when you give that child, you pass over that clan name, you are giving a character to that kind of a human being. You are paving a way for that person's future. You are breathing life to the kind of person that we want this child to be in, on how to navigate and strategically pursue and find their direction and contribute to the world in saving humanity, in saving Botho. So when we tell these stories, when we write these poems, when we sing these songs, it is because we've been afforded the privileges of language that brings us together, even when we don't know one another's languages. But in spirit and in energy and in those high frequency vibrations, we are connecting with the rest of the world. And I think that is one part of our heritage that we're embracing so beautifully as South Africans in the continent and inter-exchanging with the world, because that's what we are bringing forth every time when we're exchanging with the world. Isi se Africa, ho tswa ditsong tsa rona, ho tswa setsong sa rona. So it is in our names. We can take it as far as how we communicate and how we translate and how we contribute to the world. But at the end of the day, it starts with us and it translates to our families, to our communities, and to our nation buildings, and extending it to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will hear from Ison from Singapore.
Thank you, Master Chung. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone here. I'll just share some slides so that you can see something colorful other than just me. Okay. Okay. Master Chung, are the slides up?
Yep, we can see the slides.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, one fascinating piece of intangible cultural heritage in Singapore, which is quite unique to Southeast Asia, is the commemoration of the 7th lunar month, which refers to the Chinese lunar calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. This year, the 7th lunar month began on 29 July and ended on 26 August, usually about 28 days. And every year, its position in the Gregorian calendar changes. Singapore has a population of 5.64 million, a pretty crowded city-state. 74% ethnic Chinese. Majority of the Chinese, their ancestors hailed from southern China, including mine. So commemoration of the 7th lunar month in Singapore is quite significant. Now, the 7th lunar month is commemorated by both Buddhists and Taoists. Officially, according to the 2020 census, Buddhists make up 31% of the resident population here, while Taoists make up 8.8%. During the 7th lunar month, Buddhists observe the Ulumbana festival, or Yulanjie in Chinese, and Taoists observe Zhongyuanjie, or the Hungry Ghost Festival. Both festivals are actually very similar. They embody core values such as filial piety, generosity, compassion for others, and being grateful for one's blessings in life. It's a time to remember one's ancestors and care for the less fortunate, be it human or non-human. What's interesting is that on the ground, many Chinese practice what academics call Chinese lay religion or Chinese vernacular religion. It's a mix of both Buddhist and Taoist beliefs. And for many, what's crucial is not separating what's Buddhist from what's Taoist. What's crucial are the lived traditions and practices passed down from one generation to another. Personally, I'm fascinated with the 7th lunar month because it's a wonderful example of the mixing of different ideas and practices from different faiths. Now, for the Buddhist Ulambana festival, the term Ulambana came from an ancient Buddhist sutra in India known as the Ulambana Sutra. Ulambana means to hang upside down in Sanskrit, okay, a reference to the suffering of the deceased in the afterlife. So the Ulambana Sutra tells the story of Madhyayana, okay, a disciple of Buddha who found his deceased mother as a hungry ghost suffering in the hungry ghost realm. He was unable to eat anything he offered her, and he then asked Buddha for help in saving her. And Buddha gave him the advice of the transference of merit to one's ancestors, in this case, the suffering mother. So for Buddhists, one thing they do during the 7th lunar month is to conduct ceremonies to transfer merits to their loved ones who have passed on, to alleviate the suffering of their loved ones in the afterlife. Now, as for the Taoist festival, it can be traced to ancient China. In Chinese, it's known as Zhongyuanjie. It's translated as the Middle Primordial Festival. And the term Zhongyuan, or Middle Primordial, refers to the deity, Great Emperor Earth Official, or Diguan Dati. He's part of a Taoist trinity of deities, which you see here. They include the Great Emperor of Heaven Official, or Upper Primordial, and the Great Emperor Water Official, or Lower Primordial. So together, they represent the primordial forces of heaven, earth, and water. Now, people observed the Earth Official's birthday on the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, and on that day, it was believed that there was a breach in the cosmos, a gathering of deities, humans, and spirits from the netherworld. And people made offerings to deities, their ancestors, and hungry ghosts. So this belief in the intersection of mortal and spiritual realms has persisted to the present, 1,500 years later. And today, during the 7th lunar month, many believe that the gates of hell are opened and the hungry spirits of hell are free to wander the mortal realm to looking for food and sustenance. And this is when temporary ritual spaces emerge all around Singapore. Food offerings are laid in the open, even on pavements by the roadside. Paper offerings are burned, and all these are for the hungry spirits. It's like donating to charity and caring for the less fortunate. Okay. Now, in temples, priests and monks perform ceremonies to offer food and salvation to spirits. This is in a Taoist temple. Okay. Devotees also visit temples to repent of their sins and pray for good tidings for themselves and their loved ones. To add to the color and rituals, associations and businesses also organize elaborate festivals lasting 2 to 5 days. They include activities such as prayers, the offering of food, traditional Chinese opera performances, modern stage performances called Ge-Tai, a dinner banquet for association members, and usually at the end, a ritual burning of paper effigies. Paper products such as money, clothing, household items burned for the spirits. Such festivals are believed to accumulate good karma for the organizers. So as for me, every 7th lunar month, I try to go around Singapore and watch these festivals and speak to the organizers who, in my opinion, are the true bearers of intangible cultural heritage with regards to the 7th lunar month in Singapore. Yeah, that's it. Master Chung, you need to
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So I think it's very interesting to hear and see from all our panelists one of the heritage from their respective countries. So next, moving to the next question. Singapore is actually the world's most religiously diverse country, and also South Africa is a very rich culture and diverse communities in it. So, in your own opinion, how would the different heritage or the practices that we have foster better understanding and promote social cohesion in our countries? Yeah, so maybe we'd like to hear from you. Raj, you go first.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it is important to look at this question from the perspective of understanding our own cultures, and then also recognizing how the lessons, how the virtues of our particular heritages and practices are universal in nature, in that we can connect with each other on it. In that sense, within our own culture itself, within the Indian diaspora, firstly, there's a lot of diversity within itself. So when I talk about the Indian diaspora, there are multiple religious groups within it as well. So Indian is like an ethnicity, and we have multiple religious groups like the Hindus, the Jains, the Sikhs, so on and so forth. And within their religious groups as well, they have a lot of diversity. They have a lot of different practices. So I actually resonate very strongly with Miss Masiko as well when she talked about the oral traditions, because primarily a lot of the stories, a lot of the aspects, tenets, and understanding of our own shared culture and understanding of our ancestral roots also comes through such oral traditions. So through oral traditions, we get to understand our stories, we get to understand who we are as a people, we get to understand certain scriptural tenets, certain stories of how certain deities were, and more importantly, we also get to understand how did they demonstrate resilience in the face of adversity. I think these are lessons that become important for us when we are connecting with others, because we are able to humanize the other and look at issues of today, of our contemporary times, as issues that are distinct from the individuals. So I think for me, how I look at these practices vis-a-vis other heritages, other ethnic groups, is to understand that at the end of the day, we as society are here to face problems together. And when we are able to have that nuanced understanding, then we do not end up enmifying other ethnic groups, other cultures, and so. And this is one primary problem that we have within the realm of social cohesion, or at least something that we are trying to mitigate, because often, more times than not, due to the prevalence of certain stereotypes, and so we inadvertently feel that it is the other group, it is that other person who is our enemy, whereas actually we fail to realize that there are greater contextual issues of the day that should be targeted. So in that sense, our heritages, our cultures, our shared music, for example, dance forms, and so, they are very pure, very sacred, and very instinctive to the common person. We actually relate with each other through the modes of music, through the mode of stories, and so. And in using this, we are able to at least reduce apprehensions between each other, while at the same time appreciating our own diversity and humanizing the other as a means of coming and stepping forward to be able to look at how we can join forces and indeed join our hands around the baobab tree as a means of achieving solutions that empower all of us within society. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Sina. Are you around?
Absolutely.
Hi.
I'm so grateful. Indeed, when we look at how we honor our heritage and how we collaborate, I'm very keen on opening oral history museums, because there are many people who are not in a position to write their own stories or their biographies, not only because they cannot read or write, but sometimes they are trying to make a living. It just doesn't leave them any more time to write their stories. I have been privileged to go to at least 5 different countries where I've visited oral history museums. One of the most impressive being in Senegal, another one being in Colombia, in Medellin. I've visited another one in Argentina, and one of the most unbelievable one was the one in Uruguay, Montevideo. And so for me, I'm striving towards that day when we can open an oral history museum here in Durban, so that more and more people can share their stories. That's our heritage. When an old person dies, we say a whole library burns down. And old people are dying. in great numbers, not only because COVID-19 came, but because it's constant. And we've got to celebrate those who have passed on. They are our ancestors. Let's honor them, but also let's preserve the history, the lessons, the teachings they have given us. And if we do that through those stories written and told, audio, visual, and audio, I embrace digital technology big time. We do all of that in order to reach one another. And my biggest motto is that I tell stories in order to wake up stories in other people. If I can do that, mission accomplished.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Oh, Brother Imran, would you like to hear from you?
Yeah, you asked how to promote better social cohesion.
Yep.
That's the interesting thing, because diversity is just natural. Cultural diversity, religious diversity, and in Singapore is where you will find all this diversity in real life. If you've been to Singapore, you walk down from Hill Street all the way down to Waterloo Street, you will see religious groups with their temples, churches. We have a synagogue there. We have mosques and all that. So these are very visual. You can really see the diversity visually. But I think the challenge is whether we are able to understand deeper about these communities, their history, their heritage, and how they form part of the wider landscape of Singapore society. Because, you know, does it prick our curiosity actually to find out what's going on inside the mosques, the temples, the churches, what is the community life like? And even when we see some of these practices, just now Eisen was mentioning about the Hungry Ghost Festival, right? It's very visual. We not just visual, but we smell the smoke, we see the fire, we see the community around it. But how many of us actually try to understand a little bit deeper what was going on and what is the philosophy behind it? I see, for example, the burning of the offerings, but you know, do we really understand why they are doing it? I think that is the key issue, that deep understanding, and that comes from the lens of curiosity and wanting to know and engaging with people and asking and learning about it. And then we try to find a connection with our own heritage, with our own tradition. For example, part of the Hungry Ghost Festival was actually honoring the ancestors, right? Which we find an affinity with the Malay Muslim practice of tahlilan, or reciting prayers for the dead, which is quite a common culture in this part of the world. So once we can see that kind of affinity, I think those will actually bind us together. That's point number one. Point number two, I think, is the intercultural element that I think we need to dig deeper, because we tend to organize our diversity in very neat categories, right? Okay, so this is Malay, this is Chinese, this is Indian. And in those kind of categorization, although it helps frame our understanding of the diversity, but at the same time, it also hides a lot of the nuances. And also it hides the kind of connection and shared aspects of these various cultures. Now, I'll give you one example. The kebaya, for example. The kebaya is the upper garment worn by many Malays, Peranakan women, you know, Chinese Peranakan, even those from Portuguese Malay heritage also. You find the kebaya, if you take airline, you will find the kebaya being worn by the air stewardess of Singapore Airlines, Brunei Royal Airlines, Malaysian Airlines, and also Garuda from Indonesia. So it's quite a common culture. But you know, the origins of it actually comes from, you know, that this connection with the Arab and Persian heritage. Then it was also adopted from the 16th century by the Malaccan Peranakan, which is of Portuguese Malay descent. The Chinese Peranakan also sees the kebaya as part of their culture. The Eurasians also, and of course the Malays, and also those from the various ethnic groups in Indonesia. So such intercultural elements can be found even in food, language, etc., because cultures do intersect. And once we see our culture as not something that is so exclusive, and it's authentically ours and ours only, without, you know, and ignoring how it comes from various elements that comes into play throughout history, then we begin to adopt a kind of a very superior attitude, because we have this is ours. whereas it's actually a shared one that cuts across all these ethnic groups. So if we can celebrate a little bit more of those shared elements, that intercultural elements, instead of seeing it as so divided, I think we are moving towards more cohesive aspect of celebrating this together as part of our rich tapestry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Imran. Now we'll hear from Jaros Jaffna.
I think the most beautiful thing about being a creative or being an artist or serving your gift even is that even when you come from a community that is as diverse even in our religious practices, because we have many, many different dominions even within our country. When you are out there and serving in your corner, you are serving literally the rest of humanity. Because within your audience, there will be a Roman, a Catholic, a Zionist, an apostolic, whatever the case may be, you know, and even as you go internationally, you are served with various of minds, of intellects that you are serving at that particular moment. So by virtue of us hailing our talents, our gifts, our creativity, we end up serving the rest of humanity. And that brings us together in our diversity, because you are then able to share, you are then able to learn, you are then able to take in from other cultures, as it has been reiterated many a times today, that indeed these cultures intersect. I've learned about my Tatum from a Mexican in China, when they were describing themselves as indigenous Indians, of who they are as Bafokeng. And I was quite mesmerized because I thought this was exclusively us as Basotho or as South Africans. So indeed, these cultures intersect because we are able to exude so much out of each other. And that can be extended even in our collaborative ways as we create our various songs, our various films, our stages, our festivities. That on its own creates a platform for us to inter-exchange and to interweave and to inter-collaborate and to create for ourselves, for this generations, for the next coming generations, because indeed we are living our different imprints. And I think that it is just unfortunate that most of the time we are refusing to embrace these differences that could actually bring us together, because in our different ways of expression, there's magic indeed when we come together. Setswana, mantsho mantsho, ngwana ntshwana tsatsi, ba re mmao ke mobu, ntatao ke peo. Hlompho e le dijo tsa moya, lerato le bile pelong tsa bohle botho. E be mantletsentletse hela ngwana mobu ka jeno o entse taba. Mehlape ya ntate e ka sakeng, o bile modisa wa nnete ho ba setso, bonono, botjhaba, re tla ithuta ho tswa ho wena mma Basotho. Setswana, mantsho mantsho, ngwana ntshwana tsatsi, ba re mmao ke mobu, ntatao ke peo. And that's about that. Different cultures from Zulus, Tswanas, Sotos, Vendas, our own Rainbow Nation coming together and to celebrate who we are, because at the end of the day, these grounds, this soil, this land holds us together, from our medicine to our skies, to our cosmic, to our psyche. Love and humanity brings us together. Thank you very much.
Okay. From Ison.
Thank you, Master Chung.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here in Singapore, we have great racial and religious diversity. Sometimes it may not be easy to foster respect and tolerance across different races and religions. I work for a group of heritage companies, Journeys Private Limited and Singapore History Consultants Private Limited, and we have perfected a basic formula over the years. We believe in the principle. We provide the knowledge, which leads to greater understanding, which leads to greater appreciation of the subject matter, which is actually something that my Singaporean brother Imran raised just now. Yeah, that is the driving force. This principle is the driving force behind many of the programs and events we have organized. We try to share as much knowledge as possible and provide a platform in which knowledge is shared. And hopefully, these are the means to dispel ignorance and misunderstanding across diverse groups of people. We believe that behind every tradition, no matter which culture the tradition comes from, every practice is has hundreds or even thousands of years of history and philosophy behind it. So we try to share that in our programs and events. And once people see, hopefully once people see the reason and the history and the philosophy behind racial and religious practices, we can then begin to understand each other better and will not see these traditions as superstition or myths. Also, we believe in focusing on the similarities across different cultures and religions at a time when the world is focused on accentuating differences. Again, it's something that Brother Imran shared just now. So I'd just like to touch a bit on Hell's Museum. Hell's Museum is a museum that we set up last October in Haw Par Villa, which is a cultural park we manage in the southwest of Singapore. Okay, I'll just share this picture of Hell's Museum. Let's get a bit so that you can idea what I'm talking about. Let's share this. So it's probably this. Okay, yeah, that's Hell's Museum. Okay, so Hell's Museum covers perspectives and insights on death and the afterlife across various religions, cultures, and civilizations. And in Hell's Museum, we point out similarities across different cultures and religions with regards to perspectives of the afterlife. We focus on 8 major world religions. We classify them into 2 groups. Religions with a linear concept of time and religions with a cyclical concept of time. So religions with a linear concept of time include Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism. They have a beginning and an end of time. As for religions with a cyclical concept of time, they include religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Taoism. So we point out similarities across these religions, and we also cover that for culture. So, for example, we cover, in one part of the museum, we present a Day of the Dead altar alongside a 7th lunar month altar. These altars come from different ends of the Pacific, okay, one from Central America, the other from China. We share similarities across these altars and point out to people that we have a shared humanity. Conflict across the different cultures and groups of people. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aizen. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. You have this, I think it's from Mexico, right? The comparison between cultures in Mexico and
yes,
Chinese.
China. Yeah, Chinese.
So
Chinese
perhaps
culture.
one day we'll have, we can do a comparison between South African culture and also the local practices. So I think we can find a lot of similarities between our cultures, our different heritage and background. Yeah, so regardless of how far we are, I mean, geographically, there are many things that we can actually find that is common, that runs through the different, what do we call that, cultures that we have. So I will ask our panelists another question, okay, following this. So perhaps you would like to share how our authorities, members of our communities and societies in general are contributing to endorse and strengthen the heritage as a pillar of national identity. Yeah, maybe you will go to Raj. Maybe you can share your views on this.
Okay. I mean, how I take your question is to look at it on an institutional level in terms of, firstly, like on a government level, which agencies are there, which ministries are coordinating this effort. At the same time, looking at the grassroots. So basically, who is doing the work on the ground to promote such work. So because I'm speaking on regarding the Indian diaspora, what I feel is it's important to look at the grassroots first. So actually, for a very long time in Singapore, we have multiple organizations like SIFAS. So SIFAS is Singapore Indian Fine Arts Society, as well as smaller groups like Apsara Arts. So these are, I would say, ground-up initiatives that have continued to promote Indian traditional and classical dance, poetry, as well as performances. So SIFAS actually holds an event annually, so every year, in which it spends a few days, and every day showcases different forms, different art forms within the Indian diaspora. So on some days you have Bharatanatyam, some days you actually have even poetry or prose, so on and so forth. And for Apsara Arts, actually just as recently as April this year, they staged a performance called Paramapadam. So Paramapadam actually was an expansion of the game of snake and ladders. So what I got to know later on is that traditionally the game of snake and ladders that we know today was meant to be an instructional and fun game for individuals to play previously that would correlate with spiritual scriptures and essentially teach individuals that how they perform their karmas, how they perform their duties would reap respective consequences for them. And ultimately, the goal was to get out of samsara, this material universe. So in that sense, we have this confluence of how games, dances, and so came together to actually promote certain values. So that's something that I found really interesting. So apart from on the ground initiatives, we actually also have our governments like MCCY, Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, and as well as Ministry of Education. So why I say MOE, Ministry of Education, is because they do allow for students to lead their co-curricular activities within school. So we have like the Tamil Language Society, Indian Dance Club, for example, within schools that allow for students to engage with such art forms and actually practice them as a co-curricular activity, thereby empowering individuals, students to actually have a wholesome education where, of course, they are studying their secular subjects, but at the same time, they are also being exposed to such traditional art forms and so. And at the same time, the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth has also effectively engaged in multiple engagements and collaborations and done events. In fact, one event that I used to look forward to yearly before COVID came was the Chingay Parade. CHINGAY. So the Chingay Parade itself is something that encompasses all of the different ethnic groups of Singapore and showcases their art forms. So it's actually the Chingay Parade that was held in February this year. Online. So it actually shows the different art forms of the different ethnic groups in Singapore. So in that sense, we have a lot of different art forms and engagements that are always constantly ongoing. But at the same time, we can also use this to identify and recognize our own agency and look to see how these traditional art forms do not just stand for propagating their own art forms and so, but rather how do we bring this forward and show the beauty that is coming forward. So actually, I'm very inspired by our panelists here as well with their sharings. And I also realized that maybe one thing that I could also talk about is the confluence of the Nine Emperor Festival as well as Navaratri. So the Nine Emperor Festival is celebrated by Taoists in Singapore, and the Navaratri Festival is celebrated by Hindus, commemorating the Mother Goddess and her glory. So we actually empower and celebrate women in this 9 days in the Navaratri Festival. And both of them are coming together. And when we actually see the festivals, we see there is a use of a lot of music, a lot of dance, a lot of creative stories, a lot of, I would say, skits even acting that is put forward as a way of communicating certain stories. And so these are some of the multi-level engagements that continue to happen, both top-down as well as bottom-up. Yes.
Thank you, Raj. Okay, moving forward, for the panelists, we would like to keep our response as short as possible, within 2 minutes. Try your best. Okay, so next we'll have Dr. Sheena.
Thank you so much. I'm enjoying this. I'm listening. I'm learning so many things. I feel like I'm going to follow that person. I'm going to go to their country. I want to learn what he or she is talking about. So thank you so much. Okay, for me, the interaction between officials and arts practitioners, sometimes it feels like there's a broken line of communication. And sometimes I feel like people in the music industry are the royalty of the creative arts. And then all of us fall under. And that's a great pity, because there's no art form that should be less important than another. I also feel that sometimes we rely so much on funding for our activities. And then if we do not collaborate in my organization, Gnamasiko Arts and Heritage Trust, if we did not have sister organizations, we would have closed down by now. But because we have sister organizations, again, it goes back to that collaboration and recognizing what another organization is doing, bringing it closer, doing this, bringing it closer, and they ask for assistance from us, we do the same. I love the spoken word as much as I love the written word, being an author and all of that. But also I feel that the future of the creative arts is in interdisciplinary collaboration. The sooner all of us know that, the easier it will be, and less money will be asking from officials. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Brother Imran.
Yeah, maybe I'll just flip the question. But before that, I think, like Excellency Zainal had mentioned, some of the wonderful initiatives by the Singapore government, like we have heritage fairs and all that. That's well and fine. So I will flip the question, your question, Mr. Chum, into maybe 3 problem areas that we need to think about in terms of impediments towards expanding this whole consciousness towards heritage. Firstly, I think we have to take in mind the problem of gentrification. You know, has all areas being redeveloped and displacing a lot of the local history and culture and heritage of that area. I give you one example. I like to drink teh tarik and eat local food at the Busora Street area, but it's gentrified now with a lot of expensive Turkish restaurants, Arab restaurants, and the flavor of the original Kampung Kaji and the Malay villages there is gone. You only find maybe 1 or 2 local Malay restaurants in that area, and it's largely now tended to by people who have the money to actually go to these restaurants, right? So the gentrification process is real, even though there is a good attempt by the government to actually preserve the facade of the buildings to maintain the looks. That's one. Secondly, we also have to be mindful of the problem of exotifying, a lot of this culture in order to put it in a museum for tourists to see. Because heritage is something that is evolving. It's, I think someone used the term, a living heritage, a living tradition. And the organicity of it needs to be supported more rather than just making it into objects to be put into the museum, and you're totally killing off that whole connection between the present generation and the past. Thirdly, I think is the function of ideology that sometimes assert itself in hierarchical form, that one form of culture is superior to the other. And I'm seeing this problem within the Malay community that is seeing an increasing religiosity of a certain type, where certain practices, cultural practices, have more or less disappeared. Even just now, Excellency Zainal mentioned about wayang kulit. You practically don't see wayang kulit anymore here in Singapore. Of course, you find it a lot in Java, in Indonesia. The kuda kepang, the horse dance, it's making a revival, but at one time it was practically gone because it was seen as un-Islamic practices. And therefore, another form of culture which emerged in a different context, like in the Middle East, coming into the region and displacing a lot of the local culture because there is this sense of hierarchy of which culture is better and which one is more backward or even not good, without understanding the actual philosophy behind it and the actual use of that art form that actually unites and builds the community rather than anything else. So I think these are problems that needs to be thought through. And I think in this space, both government, advocacy groups, as well as individuals who are interested in the heritage space should come together and try and find solutions for these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. Next, we'll hear from Sister Jaros, Jakarta.
Well, the fact that Solomon Linda died impoverished in 1962 reiterates what's still happening in 22 in South Africa and maybe in parts of the world where creatives and cultural practitioners are still not viewed as workers, as laborers. And the industry is still not regulated, and therefore you're still seeing what happened to Wundate Solomon still happening today with our creatives, with our legends. And it is such unfortunate and such a sad story, because what this does as part of that lack of policies strips down our people from their dignity and their integrity. How do you continue to create and sing and develop these films that aims to preserve the indigenous knowledge and preserve our languages and our cultures, yet we are not taken care of within our constitutions or within our policies? Yes, the bill has just been put down now by our president, but there's still ample of challenges. And these policies can even be extended to the laws around taxation of the artists and the creatives, because if you are not viewing them as laborers, if you're not viewing them as workers, yet you are still taxing them as such by simply a virtue of them being legal entities and them running their businesses as registered businesses, yet they're seasonal workers and they are not even within your pension funds, they're not within your UIF, they're not within your medical aid, they're not within anything that protects any employee or any worker. I think this is really unfortunate, and these are some of the policies that we wish our governments could really invest in developing and in institutionalizing and in regulation, so that when you say you're a creative in your country with pride, that can also be extended to your economical sphere, to your family sphere, and how you're taking care of yourself and your future. And having said that, there seems to be a lot of resilience, because amongst those ample of challenges, creatives are creating. Every corner in this country, a singer is singing, a poet is reciting, a photographer is taking photos, films are being shot. We have young people at the world champion stage just yesterday, being in the forefront with the rest of the slammers and the poets within the whole world. And that gives us so much hope. We have different festivals in our country that are still beautiful platforms from the grassroots level, funded or not funded, and most of the time they are not funded because we have ample of challenges even within our funding agencies, within our countries and within our governments. But that doesn't deter us from writing those books, from publishing, from self-publishing, from communicating with the world, from exchanging, from doing our bit, because we are that type of people, a resilient nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, for Isaac, please keep within 120 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try my best. Yeah, in many countries, heritage conservation and promotion are driven by the authorities or the public sector, but there is a role for the private sector to play too. I represent Journeys and Singapore History Consultants. They are two private sector companies formed 27 years ago by my management. Our aim is to provide a deeper appreciation of the history and heritage of Singapore. We started through the organization of heritage tours and programs, but then we transitioned to the management of heritage sites. So in Singapore, heritage sites are all owned by the state. But many are tendered out to the private sector in a revenue model.
We can't hear you.
To lease. You can hear me now? Because I'm yeah, all good. All good. Okay, okay. So yeah, as I was saying, in Singapore, heritage sites are all owned by the state. Many are tendered out to the private sector in a revenue model. That means instead of the state giving us money to run the heritage site, we have to pay the state for the privilege of running the heritage site. So we specialize in taking on management of heritage sites that are in danger of disappearing or being demolished. And so one of them is Haw Par Villa, which is where my office is located. I'll just share a photo of one slide of Haw Par Villa. Okay, so this is Haw Par Villa, and we've been managing it since 2017. Our aim for Haw Par Villa is to make it relevant to the next generation and create and share content that is both entertaining and educational, and ultimately convince the authorities to conserve them. So in Haw Par Villa, we have to organize events such as concerts, exhibitions. Even just today, we have a crypto art exhibition, for example. And of course, the opening of new museums such as Hell's Museum. Our ultimate goal for Haw Par Villa is to convince the authorities to apply for UNESCO World Heritage status for the park. Singapore currently has just one UNESCO World Heritage site, that's Botanic Gardens. We fully believe Haw Par Villa ticks all the boxes in terms of qualification for UNESCO World Heritage status. Okay. Thank you. Oh, I kept it 120.
Thank you. Okay, now for the last question, we hope you can everyone can just give a very short response, 2-minute response to this. Okay, so in your humble opinion, are freedom of speech and technology expressed through the use of social media platforms expanding the knowledge about our different cultural groups, or in the contrary, generating conflict between them? Maybe we'll hear from all our panelists. Mr. Raj.
Thank you. I think there definitely has been a lot more engagement and a lot more appreciation for the different cultural groups as they use social media to promote their art forms. And I think, but I think what I can say is that the engagement has been quite slow. So in that sense, even though there is engagement, it's a bit slower. And I would say, in general and overall, there has been a lot more positive engagement. I think it also matters about the way in which certain things are expressed. At least within the Indian diaspora, I have not personally seen moments of such conflict taking place. Even though I can say that the engagement in itself has generally been a bit on the slow side. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. China? You're on, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, thank you. I think there has been a bit of a freedom of speech in the sense that we decide on what we are talking about, what we are putting on those social media spaces. Or one of the things that we've been lucky to do is to do international seminars online. And it's been possible for us to interact with people in different parts of the world to share our ideas and plan for the future. And also collaboration has sprung from those discussions. Another thing as well is that in those online platforms, people have shared information about events taking place in different parts of the country and the world, which we would not have known about. So whether you call that freedom of speech or not, but it means we're able to connect with one another. We've had storytellers from Chile performing on our stages, even though they haven't come to South Africa. We've had Indian storytellers performing on our festivals. on all of those things. Let's use this. Let's not go overboard. Sometimes people use social media to hurt each other. I think freedom for me should not be freedom to hurt another person or to throw mud onto what other organizations or other arts practitioners are doing. Instead, we must learn from each other. And if we can add value to what they are doing, let's go ahead and add value. And the different styles of presenting, where people are doing digital ways of using music, whether they're using dance, whether they're using installations, all of that is something to be celebrated. And those who do not know how to can always be assisted by those who are capable of doing. But we are on the road to having more freedom of speech and sharing and growing and developing one another. And for me, nation building, we're doing it one story at a time.
Thank you, Doctor. Imran.
Yeah, I mean, I can only answer from an individual perspective. For me, I find the internet has been a useful source of information, especially finding hidden communities that I've never encountered before. So, you know, when they put up their content online, I begin to see that, you know, fascinating forms of diversity from many parts of the world. But again, internet is, you know, you will find what you're looking for. If you're looking for conflict, you will find conflict. If you're looking for something good, you will find good. So I think it comes back to the education process, the cultivation of the individual, as well as the general culture within that society that determines how we make use of these spaces in order to empower us to search for something good and to educate ourselves, or to actually generate conflict. So that's what the internet is today.
Thank you, Imran. Hey, Jaros.
The use of virtual spaces has been quite a blessing. And I think we are also privileged as a country that within our constitution, freedom of speech and freedom of culture and freedom of education, it's quite a core of our country. Unlike most of our sister countries, where we see a journalist being kept or in prison for saying stuff or writing stuff, in our country, we hardly experience as such. We are quite embracing even the new evolution that comes with being a global world, you know, spaces like your LGBTQI plus societies, people are fully expressing themselves and their creativity and their art. And even though sometimes it seems a bit exhibitated and quite not structural and can be quite out there, but it's there, and it's that's one policy that I think our country has done quite a massive and magnificent groundwork on it. When it comes to the world of 4IR and our fourth industrial revolution, I think even COVID in our country or in the world has exacerbated and pushed us to get out of our comfort zones and to explore. Throughout 2020, 2021, during lockdown, we were able to execute our festival each month online. And by the end of 2022, actually by May 2022, we were able to launch our Poetic Blues poetry anthology featuring 25 South African poets from all over the country. And that was a result of these monthly events that we were hosting online. So we managed to take advantage of the resources that we have, even though data is still expensive, even though data still hasn't fallen in our country, but we managed to keep ourselves busy and creating and writing and creating a space for therapy, because obviously that was a time of anguish, that was a time of depression and sorrow and just a dark cloud over the whole world. And when we were restricted not to travel, we had to find strategic ways on how we can come together and still be able to connect. So we are embracing that platform. The problem though is still monetization. If we can crack how we can monetize these digital spaces and really empower our creatives, then it will be a winner for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Brother Aisen.
Well, I'll keep it short. Yeah, of course. I'm all for the use of technology and social media in spreading knowledge and resolving conflict. This webinar is a great example of it. Thanks to an app like Zoom, we are able to meet and share about our heritage across continents and oceans. Of course, there will be conflict. Wherever you have humanity, you have conflict. I believe conflict is inherent in humankind. But as long as we have responsible moderators and gatekeepers, strictly enforcing rules of engagement, then we can create safe spaces for all to share all they want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So very happy and very fruitful to hear from everyone, all panelists. So having heard from all of you, perhaps you will, before we close the whole session, we would like to have hear from you one comment or a learning point from you. Yep, maybe start from Raj. Just a quick, maybe 1 minute.
My sincere aspiration is that let us not blind ourselves in our thirst for material empowerment to the spiritual and intrinsic values that inherently bind all of us together as one. I think even as we chase material advancement, we are often ignoring how verily the qualities that humanize each other and allow us to recognize the value and assets that we are collectively together is something that we should be working effectively towards building, because only in recognizing our own collective solidarity can we always be ready to seek solutions and create value, not only for ourselves, but also for future generations to come. And I'm very grateful to have been a speaker and panelist with all of you here. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Doctor?
Thank you so much. I would like to implore people in government positions not to wait until people in the heritage and cultural space die, and then after they have died, honor them and celebrate them. Wow, they were unbelievable. I would like people in the creative arts to be empowered and celebrated and honored and respected while they still live. One of the things, for instance, that I decided to do when I turned 60, I decided that my birthday, 24th of October, shall be known as National Storytelling Day. And we started in 2019, and every year now on the 24th of October at 11 o'clock sharp, we tell stories in different parts of South Africa. People have joined us in Botswana, in Kenya, in Jamaica, and I'm so glad that we can do that while I'm still alive. And our stories are like a beautiful blanket we can wear in times of good and in times of pain. Let's celebrate each other's stories. We can touch the past and feel the future.
Thank you, Dr. Imran.
Yeah, 2 quick points. I think it's important to, as we learn about each other's culture, it's important to honor the other person's culture, the other person's stories, instead of extracting it for our own benefits. And this is the difference between cultural appropriation, in which we tend to erase and marginalize the origin of that culture, versus cultural borrowing. Because when we borrow something, we know it's not ours, and yet we appreciate it and we acknowledge where it comes from and we celebrate it together. So I think that is something that we have to put in mind always. The second point has got to do with how heritage actually encapsulates a lot of local wisdoms. We lose heritage means that we lose our local wisdoms. And when we lose our local wisdoms, we become an empty vessel that can be easily filled in by something external, which may not be a part of us. And this is the colonization of the mind that can occur if we are not careful, because we have lost our own bearing, our own local wisdom, our own connection with our own history, heritage, and things that has bind us from the past till today. So that is why increasingly I'm seeing a lot of radicalization of individuals, because they are alienated from their own culture. They are alienated from their own heritage. So reviving heritage actually has a very important role in strengthening the core of the individual, so that that person can feel his place in this world, feel his connection with the past, with his ancestors, with his history, and yet move forward in a more productive way. And to use the term again, to celebrate with everyone else as being part of the wider humanity without feeling inferior, but to be equal with everyone else and to see all cultures in that same light as part of our common human heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. We hear from Jaros.
We are peo planters. We are seed planters. We plant in people's hearts. We plant in people's minds. And sometimes, yes, we are the peo receivers, because people plant in our hearts, people plant in our minds. There are no gatekeepers here, there shouldn't be. You rise, I rise. When I rise, you rise. So let's water our roots so we can blossom into very many branches that we are in celebrations of one another. Thank you for the space. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. And last but not least, Aisen.
I'm honored to be able to share the little that I know and learn from all of you today. The more I learn, the more I realize how much I do not know. So thank you, everyone. And to our South African brothers and sisters, you're more than welcome in sunny Singapore anytime.
Thank you very much, all panelists. Okay, now I would like to hand it back to Ambassador Rodrigo. Sir.
Thank you very much, Master Chung. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to Her Excellency Charlotte Locke, His Excellency Zainal Mantaha, for getting together today on this South African morning and in this Singapore afternoon to celebrate heritage in a matter of understanding that it's all about respect and tolerance. The ideals, the values, the principles of others have to be looked upon with love. And we, as a one nation, protect those values and principles and customs and traditions, because that's what will save humanity. Thank you once more. Hope to see you again next year to celebrate that 30th anniversary of relations between Singapore and South Africa in this spirit of Ubuntu. Good afternoon, good morning.